We're looking at a very basic menu system using objects as buttons. This is what we did in class just recently, but this tutorial will help you to review that work so that you can create your own. So we've got a very simple system here. This would be our title screen, our main screen that loads when the game starts, and we could go to our instructions screen by clicking on the instructions button. Obviously not much on here, it's just to show that we can move from one screen to the other. And then we have a back button that takes us back to the title screen. So very simply, at the moment, it's just flipping between the two. So let's have a look at how that's done. What we have are some sprites. I've made two sprites, one for just the title. Okay, so it's just a sprite for the title and one for the instructions one. They're purely there at the moment to show that we're on the different pages. Obviously, you put much more interesting sprites and backgrounds and so forth into your different rooms to make them look good. We just needed something to show which page we're on. And then the main ones really are the instructions button. So again, it's just a sprite that looks a bit like a button, and another one that's a back button. And again, you'll probably want to make much more interesting looking buttons. They may even animate down the track. So when you go and click on it, it might change shape slightly, look like it's being pressed, all those sorts of fun things. But for now, just some very basic button looking sprites. As we know, we need to always have an object to put a sprite into a game room. They can't go in by themselves, so I made a title object. Again, all it's really got is having that sprite on there. It has no events, it doesn't do anything, it just allows us to put it in the game room. And the same for the instructions title. It just has that sprite attached to it, no actions, it doesn't do anything, just lets us put it in the room. The main thing, of course, is the two buttons. If we just have a look at the instruction button first of all, it has the sprite that we made for it. It's responding to a left pressed, so when we click on it with our left mouse button, and what it's doing is a very simple piece of code. Just make it a bit bigger. Okay, and it's this piece of code here that says room underscore go to, and then the name of the room. So the name of the room as we see down the bottom here. So very, very simple piece of code. Speaking of rooms, we have our two rooms, our room title. So again, room title, whatever the first room in our list is, will be the one loaded by GameMaker when the program starts. So we've made that our title screen. So here we can see our object object for our title, just so that we can physically put it in the room. And of course, there's our button object to go to the instructions. And our instruction screen, very, very similar. There's our object for our instructions title and our back object to let us go back to the other screen. So it's all very, very straightforward, but let's have a look at how we actually do that. So I'm just going to make one more button to take us to another pretend room. So we'll maybe call this one we'll call it the game room. So I'm going to start by making a sprite. So as usual, just create a sprite, right click, or many other ways you can get to this. You can see shortcuts, of course, there's a menu up the top, but right click's my favorite. So create sprite. Now we want to make our sprite a bit wider. It's starting off with our square, so it's 64 by 64 pixels at the moment. So we want to change that, so we're going to do a resize. And we're going to resize the canvas. So canvas being the actual overall shape. We're not resizing what's there, we're making it actually bigger. So we'll resize the canvas. And what we've done so far is we've just made this 4 times wider, so that becomes 256, and we'll leave the height for now. Again, remember, these sizes are purely made up right now. You'd make a size for a sprite based on what you need it to actually be, so you have to work that out. So we'll press apply on that, and you can see it seems like it's shrunk down because it's fitting in the screen, but it's actually a lot wider than it used to be. And you can tell it's 4 times wider than what it is high. Okay, so now we're going to edit that image. Okay, and I'm just going to use this button here, which is center and fit, just to shrink it down to fit into my space, which it actually is. I don't have a huge amount of space because all the menu options are here now. I might actually shrink this side down a little bit. I don't need it that wide, just to give me a bit more space to work here. Okay, before we actually draw anything, I do want to quickly bring you down to the bottom of this toolbar and talk a little bit about layers. Now, we may not have done layers in class, but they're really, really useful. And if you've never done anything with drawing programs before, and that's all we're really doing now, some basic drawing, layers are really powerful. As the name suggests, it lets you create layers, a bit like putting bits of paper on top of each other, and it lets you separate out parts of your drawing, and it makes it really easy to make edits and things later on. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to change the name of this layer. Now, just go a little bit further down. Okay, so edit layer properties. I'm going to call this layer the background. Okay, and just have to close it. I'm actually now going to create a new layer. So this button here, a new layer. And again, I'm going to right click and change its properties. I'm going to call this one the text, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Now, when you're working with layers, it's really important to click on the layer that you want to change. So when doing the editing, whichever layer is selected here is the one that's going to be working on, because you are literally drawing on separate parts. So for the moment, we make sure we click our background layer, and we're going to draw the background shape of our button. All right. Then what we'll be doing is clicking on our text layer and putting our text on that layer, and you'll see why that's really powerful when we do it. So with our background layer selected, I'm just going to draw a really basic shape. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool. I'm going to grab a couple of different colors. I might go with a white for the background of the button again, just like we were doing before, and not black. Let's do a red or pinky red this time. I'll do red. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw that shape. Okay. Sorry, I forgot one thing. Well, actually, we'll go with this. So we'll go with that, and then maybe I'll put the white around the outside. So I'm going to now use my fill tool here and just fill what's left around it. There's lots of ways you can draw a button. This is not what all buttons have to look like, but just something quick that gives a bit of shape to it. Okay, so if I come back down to that panel to my layers, I'm now going to choose the text layer. I'm now going to take my text tool, and I'm going to still use white in this case for my text. So text, I might want to change my fonts and sizes. They're up here, so all different fonts that you might have available. I'm going to make it bold, and I'll maybe make it, let's make it 15 points. You have to experiment with sizes to find what fits in nicely for you. If I now come down here and I click, I can start writing some text. Whoops, that hasn't worked. So I'm writing in red. So let's not do that. What I need to do is swap my colors over. So the main color is always the first color. I should be writing in white. Okay. So now that I've done that, what I have is a background, and I have the writing. Oh, got a bit of red, doesn't matter. Okay, and you can see I'm turning off layers just to see them, all right? And I can lock them as well so I can't accidentally edit them and do some really cool stuff. This is why I like layers, because I haven't really put that game wording where I wanted it a bit more centered. So if I had done it on one layer, I would have to sort of cut that out, move it, refill in areas, and if I had a really fancy background, that could be really difficult. But because I've done layers, I can independently control them. So if I want to move just the words, so long as I've got the text layer chosen and my move tool here, I can grab that and move it around without affecting the background layer or any other layers. The same if I was doing it with the background layer, I could be moving that around without changing anything on other layers. So it gives you that ability to manipulate parts of your image, almost like I said, you're cutting bits out of paper, sticking them on top of each other, rearranging them, and not until you're done, it's sort of like glued and stuck together. So layers can be really, really powerful. So again, I'm just make sure I've got my text layer chosen. I am just going to set it a tiny bit more, and there we go. I'll be happy with that. Okay. So I can close out of that just to go back to the main screen of my sprite and just make sure I name it. So I'll go SPR for sprites, and just to follow what I've already done up with the other buttons, I'm going to call it game button. Okay, oops, I spelled that wrong. Game button. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now I need another object. So again, I'm going to right click, create object. Okay, I'm going to call this obj underscore game button. Okay, and I'm going to add that sprite to it, the one we just made. Here it is. And then I need to add the code. So I'm adding an event. I'm adding a mouse event, and it is the mouse left press. You could do right or middle, of course, but left is the traditional one for an action, so left pressed. And I now need to write my code. I won't write this code yet because what I might do is make the room first so that it actually will show up. So let's come down now to the rooms, right click on there, create a room. I won't put anything in it yet, I'll just go room underscore game. Okay, so that's going to be our name for our room. So now I can come back to that button that I was doing. I can come back to the button, to that code, and here's where I put it in. Room underscore go to brackets, and now the name of our room. So RM underscore, and you can see it's already coming up in the list. Here are the rooms that I've made. So at this point I can just double click on that to get the rest of the name. If it was a long name, that could be helpful. And then just close my bracket off and put my semicolon on the end. So that's my code. So now I need to actually be able to use that code. I'm going to go to my title room. I'm going to put a copy of that button into my room. So now I have the instructions button and the game button. If I run this now, I'm going to have a problem. If I'm on this screen and I press on that game button, I'm going to end up on this room, but this room has no way of moving back. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a copy of the object back button that I made earlier, because that button takes me back to my main title screen. I don't have to make a whole new button for this. I just need to use this one because I want to go back to the same place, so I can reuse this button. You might notice I haven't made a title, and I'm doing that just for the speed of this video. I won't waste time doing that. You can make and should make some sort of indication that you're in the right place. But let's just test out what we've done. So we're going to press play. Okay, so our title, just to know where we are, we can go to instructions and back like we saw at the start of the video, but now we can press our game, and there's that screen that we went to, and now we can go back to it as well. So we've added to our menu system very easily. So you can see it doesn't take too much to create a menu system. Yes, again, this is a very simple looking one. I would encourage you to make more elaborate buttons and titles and backgrounds and stuff in your game. Maybe not in your tutorial, but certainly in your game you'd want it to be a lot better than this. But the functionality and the way to do it, as we've seen here, is not particularly difficult. So off you go.